Reminiscences of the Great Mutiny, 1857 to 59, by William Forbes Mitchell, late Sergeant, 93rd Sutherland Highlanders. London, Macmillan & Co. in New York. Published 1893. Chapter 4. The 93rd. Anecdotes of the Secunderbad, I can't pronounce that, General Ewart, and the Shah Najif. This is a book I found on archive.org. I'll probably link it in the description, but I want to read this part here that I was reading today. In the first chapter of these reminiscences, I mentioned that before leaving Dover, the 93rd obtained a number of volunteers from the other Highland regiments serving in England. Ours was the only Highland regiment told off for the China expedition, and it was currently whispered that Lord Elgin had specifically asked for us to form his guard of honor at the court of China after he had administered his due castination to the Chinese. Whether the report was true or not, the belief did the regiment no harm. It added to the esprit de corps, which was already a prominent feeling in the regiment, and enabled the boys to boast to the girls in Portsmouth that they were, quote, a cut above, end quote, the other corps of the army. In support of this, the fact is worthy of being put on record that although the regiment was not, as is usually the case, confined to barracks the night before embarking, but we were allowed to leave till midnight. Still, when the time to leave the barracks came, there was not a single man absent nor a prisoner in the guard room, and General Britton put in garrison orders that he had never been able to say the same of any other corps during the time he had commanded the Portsmouth garrison. But the 93rd were no ordinary regiment. They were then the most Scotch of all Highland regiments. In brief, they were a military Highland parish, minister and elders complete. The elders were selected from among the men of all ranks, 2 sergeants, 2 corporals, and 2 privates. And I believe it was the only regiment in the army which had a regular service of communion plate. And in the time of peace, the Holy Communion, according to the Church of Scotland, was administered by the regimental chaplain twice a year. I hope the young 2nd Battalion in the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders are like the old 93rd in this respect. At the same time, I don't ask them ever to pray for the men who took away the numbers from our regiments. May their beards be defiled, is the only feeling I have for them. By taking away the old numbers, a great deal was lost, and as far as I can see, nothing has been gained except confusion and the utter effacement of all the old traditions of the army. This dude is pissed. The old numbers could easily have been retained along with the territorial designations. I hope, at all events, that the present regiment will never forget that they are the descendants of the old 93rd, the, quote, thin red line, end quote, which Sir Colin Campbell disdained to form 4 deep to meet the Russian cavalry on the morning of the memorable 25th of October, 1854. Quote, as he said, "Steady, 93rd, keep steady, damn all that eagerness," were Sir Colin's memorable words, but I am describing the relief of Lucknow, not the thin red line of the balaclava. Among the volunteers who came from the 72nd was a man named James Wallace. He and 6 others from the same regiment joined my company. Wallace was not his real name, but he never took anyone into his confidence, nor was he ever known to have any correspondence. He neither wrote nor received any letters, and he was usually so taciturn in his manner that he was known in the company as the Quaker, a name which had followed him from the 72nd. He had evidently received a superior education, for if asked for any information by a more ignorant comrade, he would at once give it, or, questioned as to the translation of a Latin or French quotation in a book, he would give it without the least hesitation. I have often seen him on the voyage out, walking up and down on the desk of the Belisile during the watches of the night, repeating the famous poem of Lamartine, Le Chien de Solitaire, commencing, I cannot pronounce this, I am not French, Hélas, so I can't pronounce this. It's a French poem. He's walking up and down on his night watch, quoting like French poetry. He has really high grade education. That's what you need to know. Okay. Taking him all in all, Quaker Wallace was a strange enigma which no one could solve. When pressed to take promotion, for which his superior education well fitted him, he absolutely refused, always saying that he had come to the 93rd for a certain purpose, and when that purpose was accomplished, he only wished to die. There's a little poem here written about him. With his back to the field and his feet to the foe, and leaving in battle no blot on his name, look proudly to heaven from the deathbed of fame. During the march to Lucknow, it was a common thing to hear the men in my company say they would give a day's grog to see Quaker Wallace under fire, and the time had now come for their gratification. There was another man in the company who had joined the regiment in Turkey before embarking for Crimea. He was also a man of superior education, but in many respects the very antithesis of Wallace. He was both wild and reckless. He used often to receive money sent to him from someone, which he regularly spent in drink. He went under the name of Hope, but that was also known to be an assumed name, and when the volunteers from the 72nd joined the regiment in Dover, it was remarked that Wallace had the address of Hope, and had asked to be posted in the same company. Yet the two men never spoke to one another. On the contrary, they evidently hated each other with a mortal hatred. If the history of these two men could be known, it would without doubt form material for a most sensational novel. Ironic that this guy wrote this in the 1800s, by the way. And he's the only person who ever wrote about it, so you should write down things that happen. Just saying. Just about the time the men were tightening their belts and preparing for the dash on the breach of the Secunderabad, this man Hope commenced to curse and swear in such a manner that Captain Dawson, who commanded the company, checked him, telling him that oaths and foul language were no signs of bravery. Hope replied that he did not care a D with a long dash, because this dude didn't write the cuss word, what the captain thought, that he would defy death, that the bullet was not yet molded that would kill him, and he commenced exposing himself above the mud wall behind which we were lying. The captain was just on the point of ordering a corporal and a file of men to take Hope to the rear guard as drunk and riotous in the presence of the enemy, when Pipe Major John Malode was close to the captain and said, "Don't mind the poor lad, sir. He's not drunk. He's fey," meaning doomed. "It's not himself that's speaking. He will never see the sun set." The words were barely out of the Pipe Major's mouth when Hope sprang up onto the top of the mud wall, and a bullet struck him on the right side, hitting the buckle of his purse belt, which diverted its course, and instead of going right through his body, it cut him round the front of his belly below the waist belt, making a deep wound, and his bowels burst out, falling down to his knees. He sank down at once, gasping for breath, when a couple of bullets went through his chest, and he died without a groan. John Malode turned to the Captain Dawson and said, "I told you so, sir. The lad was fey. I am never deceived in a fey man. It was not himself who spoke when swearing in yon terrible manner." Just at this time, Quaker Wallace, who had evidently been a witness of Hope's tragic end, worked his way along to where the dead man lay, and, Looking on the distorted features, he solemnly said, "The fool hath said in his heart that there is no God. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. I came to the 93rd to see that man die." All this happened only a few seconds before the assault was ordered, and attracted but little attention except from those who were immediate witnesses of the incident. The gunners were falling fast, and almost all eyes were turned on them and the breach. When the signal for the assault was given, Quaker Wallace went into the Secunderbar like one of the Furies, if there are male Furies, plainly seeking death but not meeting it, and quoting the 116th Psalm, Scotch version in meter, beginning at the first verse, "I love the Lord, because my voice and prayers he did hear. I, while I live, will call on him who bowed to me his ear." And thus he plunged into the Secunderbar, quoting the next verse at every shot fired from his rifle, and at each thrust given by his bayonet. "Isle of salvation, take the cup. On God's name will I call. I'll pay my vows now to the Lord, before his people all." It was generally reported in the company that Quaker Wallace single-handedly killed 20 men, and one wonders at this, remembering that he took no comrade with him and did not follow Sir Colin's rule of fighting in threes, but whenever he saw an enemy, he, quote, "went for him." I may here remark that the case of Wallace proved that in a fight like the one of the Secunderbar, where the enemy is met hand to hand and foot to foot, the way to escape death is to brave it. Of course, Wallace might have been shot from a distance, and in that respect, he only ran an even chance with the others. But wherever he rushed with his bayonet, the enemy did give their utmost to give him a wide berth. By the time the bayonet had done its work of retribution, the throats of our men were hoarse with the shouting of "Conpar, ye bloody murderers!" The taste of powder, those were the days when muzzle-loading cartridges had to be bitten with the teeth after all, made men almost mad with thirst. And with the sun high overhead, and being fresh from England, with our feathered bonnets, red coats, and heavy kilts, we felt the heat intensely. That's a true story, by the way. That actually happened. I thought that was really cool. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed that. God bless. Appreciate you.